Awesome. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. As the folks start to filter in, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for spending some time with us. I'm happy to report, happy and sad, I guess, that this is the second to last day of the Manny's Super Civic Cyber Conversations. This is our 106th conversation in a little over a month. And we're so proud of this effort. And I just want to thank you for the time and for joining us tonight. My name is Manny Yacutiel. I own a small business on the corner of 16th and Valencia in San Francisco, which is a civic gathering space. Unfortunately, we had to shut down because of the shelter-in-place order, but just because the physical place is closed doesn't mean the work is over. And so we are continuing the work of engaging the public civically, and we're doing it through the internet and straight to you. And today, oh my goodness, today we get to start the evening off with a hero of mine, an incredible leader, an activist, a change maker named David Simas, who is the CEO of the Obama Foundation. So welcome, David. Hello.
Manny, hello.
Hi.
And I just want to thank you for what you are doing. When you think about what the President and Mrs. Obama, what their North Star is and how they view civic leadership and expressions of citizenship, the fact that you are creating this space around who we are as people and how we fit into a community is a really beautiful thing. And I have such deep appreciation for you and how you do your work. And so thank you.
Wow. Well, that is very high praise coming from someone who is at the top of the flagpole doing so much amazing work affecting millions. So I've got some questions for you. I want to talk to you. I have a bunch of different points I want to talk about. I want to learn about you. I want to know a little bit more about you and who you are. You're a little bit tough to research. I just have to say, you don't have a huge footprint. So I'm going to do some digging. And then I want to talk about the president's legacy and the future. So why do you love being Portuguese?
Oh my goodness.
Because you love being Portuguese. You're part of your Portuguese-ness. Portuguesity.
My father is from an island in the middle of the Atlantic, the Azores, the island of São Miguel, St. Michael.
Okay.
My mother is the youngest of 9 and the only girl who grew up in the southern portion of continental Portugal.
Okay.
They met in Africa, got married in Lisbon, south of Lisbon, and then moved into this little Portuguese American enclave in southeastern Massachusetts where I was born. And so many, my memories of being a child, surrounded by aunts and uncles and my grandparents and my Portuguese immigrant neighbors, in the music, in the culture, always gave me a sense of being part of this big extended family and community. And so that, to me, even when I hear the word, it conjures images of the bakery in the corner of School Street in the square. It conjures images of when I was probably 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
There would be this man hauling a wooden cart down the street where we lived, wearing big rubber wader boots, overalls, and yelling at the top of his lungs that he had the day's catch in Portuguese. And mostly women coming out from the triple-decker homes onto the street.
Wow.
And it's vivid for me. I'm so glad you began there, because it really is part of who I am.
I've noticed that, and I love that, and I think in America and everywhere, but I think especially in America, we have this promise of being able to love where our family is from also. and in addition to love being American. And so I know from you that you are proud of your Portuguesity, which we've just trademarked, so no one
It's
uses
a new word, yes.
that. Yes. Okay, I want to take you back to a moment, and I want you to tell me what it felt like. So I think it was after you graduated college, and we'll get to the fact that you run the Obama Foundation. Don't worry, everyone. We're going to talk about Obama. But first, I want to talk about you. So a little bit after college, you led I think it was after college, you led a rally of over 15,000 people in your town's central square to demand that a local cable monopoly also carry Portuguese language only television. And you won, and you became a little bit of a superstar. What was it like? First of all, why did you do that? Second of all, what was it like leading that rally of 15,000 people to demand Portuguese only language television?
Working backwards, it was terrifying. I had no idea what I was doing. But I was surrounded by a group of people who had worked so long and so hard. And so I had a role, and I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Why? So the community was probably 60% Portuguese, and then in New Bedford and Fall River, the two big cities near us, 60 to 70% Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, the Portuguese government had offered free local programming.
Yeah.
The cable company said no. I was in law school at the time and had a little bit too much time on my hand, which is weird for a law student.
Mm-hmm.
And found out, Manny, that they had violated their local cable agreement and hadn't built it the right way they had promised. And so I took that violation and said, well, there's an easy way for you to resolve this.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, they agreed to provide Portuguese language programming. Now, here's the most important part for me. That afternoon, when they first began to air images from Portugal, and this is in 1994, into my hometown in Taunton, I go to my vovoo's house. Vovoo is the Portuguese word for grandfather. And I sit down.
It's a nice
with
word.
I sit down with my vovoo and my vava.
No, is that really how you call it?
Yeah, my grandmother and grandfather.
Vavoo and Vava, I love it.
Vavoo and Vava, and Manny, they turn on while I'm sitting there with them for the first time, this television, this station. He had not seen images from the place that he had left more than 20 years before until that moment. And the thing that I will never forget about my vavoo at that time was, think about the immigrant experience, and you know a little bit about this. You leave everything. You leave family, you leave language, you leave culture, you leave food, you leave memory and retain a little bit of it. And there's a Portuguese word that's called saudade. And the closest translation is longing and melancholy, this kind of deep wistfulness and longing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden he's sitting there and he sees the images and he hears the music and he hears the language. And it was as if he was transported back to that younger man on that day that he did that crazy thing to leave everything behind with this hope that you're going to create something that's better than what you're leaving behind. And so, yeah, it was about TV.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was 15,000 people. And yeah, I didn't have a good sense of what I was doing, but watching him at that moment in time, made it all worthwhile. And that informed that entire kind of crazy effort. Really was at the heart of essentially the way I have organized and have thought about organizing over the course of the past 26, 27 years.
I had a feeling that was a watershed moment, and it seems like the kind of thing that would be a watershed moment for a young David, and to see the effect of politics and of advocacy,
Yes.
and it takes it and brings it home. My father, when he bought me my first car, an 1989 Oldsmobile, white exterior, brown velvet interior, from a freeway an auction underneath the freeway for I think $800. He was very proud to say he got me a car. I was very appreciative of it, and he gave me a cassette. And in the cassette was a recording of Afghan Jewish singing, which he would listen to, and it was his way of kind of passing down songs, which was his way of remembering. So I totally feel you, and I relate. Um, President Obama, you've heard of him.
44.
44. Wish we could re-amend the Constitution to bring him back, as I'm sure a lot of us do. We're going to skip a little bit. You were his director of political affairs in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you a toughie, which is, what is one character lesson you learned from working closely with President Barack Obama?
There are many, but the one that was fairly consistent was always about taking the long view. It was a consistent pattern of behavior and approach to decision making as President of the United States, where even if there were a really important momentary crisis that you were dealing with, mm-hmm. he would always force us, and you would see him talk through basically stepping back, lifting up, and beginning to think about what this means in 10, 15, 20 years. Why? Because it may be the right thing to do X right now. Mm-hmm. And it may resolve one of the momentary problems. But if you don't begin to engage in the level of thinking that says, okay, what are the unintended consequences? How does this intersect with this or that or the other thing? And what is the foundation that we are laying upon which other decisions are made? Because when you take the long view, it also helps you to understand the very incremental nature of democracy, mm-hmm. and certainly the way it is embedded in American history. Then he would talk about how from the Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education, mm-hmm. how it took decades for that ruling to truly take effect throughout mm-hmm. the country. It doesn't take away from the importance of the underlying Supreme Court case, but it allows us all as citizens, as activists, as organizers, to step back and to understand the importance of even the little victories that then build on to the next one, that build on to the next one. And so when you can step back and take the long view, it not only allows you to appreciate the moment much better, but it gives you a historical perspective that frankly, not just a leader needs, but a citizen needs in what they do. And so that quality of removing us from the moment, mm-hmm. got to deal with what you have to deal with.
Yeah.
But take the long view.
So how do you think you would bring that to today's moment? I mean, we're in quite a moment. We're in a moment. Yeah. My team and I keep laughing because I say everything's a moment. Like, let's have a little plant moment. We're going to have a little disco moment. We're in a pandemic moment right now. So how would President Obama be kind of implementing that same way of being if he were in the chair still, do you think?
There are two examples. One was in 2009, 2010 with H1N1. And then in the second term with Ebola. And his leadership approach, even in a pandemic or potential pandemic situation, first of all, is surround yourself with the preeminent experts around this subject matter. Learn all you can about previous instances. What worked, what didn't work, what can we learn? And then basically approach it from that type of perspective. So in a pandemic situation, I think it's, in some ways, it's less a projection forward and taking a long view, but it's the ability to look back and to say, this isn't the first time we have faced something like this. This is different, but there's an entire historical context upon which we and others can build. What can we learn from the way different states deal with different emergency situations, right? The thing, however, that I think is the most important for us to think about in a pandemic situation, because you worked in that building, Manny, you've seen this, especially the national security people. And the White House is divided between, and this is an oversimplification of the division of work. Okay. You've got your national security folks, and then you've got your domestic folks. For both of them, though, but especially with the national security team, process, procedure, repetition, right? They are so focused on making sure that the process and the planning that goes into their day-to-day is tight. Why? Because when a crisis hits, you need to have gone through all of the tabletop exercises, all of the emergency planning, because at that point, everything is built for the purpose of giving the President of the United States, whoever that person is, as much information as you can, understanding that it's always imperfect.
Right.
As many options as you possibly can, with pros and cons, a long-term assessment of what they mean in a historical context, and then hopefully a recommendation or a set of recommendations for the president to exercise against. But those are outputs that come from discipline and process and preparation and training.
Oy vey.
Oy vey.
Oy vey. Lysol injections probably is not something that you would see filtered up to the president in that case. What a mess. What a mess we're in. Okay, let's get to the Obama Foundation. I want to hear so many stories about your time in the White House. I would love to talk about what it was like working for President Obama for hours. And I've had the privilege of talking to Valerie Jarrett on these, and David Plouffe, and Dan Pfeiffer, and Sarah Hurwitz. And so we've had some good conversations with folks about Obama, and a lot of people have been tuning in a lot. So let's just put a pin in that for right now. So you are the CEO of the Obama Foundation. Damn, I mean, that is a really cool thing to do. I mean, you're like helping run this like extension of his legacy. And so I want to ask you about, it feels like there's a lot of stuff going on, right? You've got the Obama Scholars and the Obama Fellows, which maybe it's not happening right now, and then the museum. And so I guess, like, can you just help me understand? I know there's a lot of programs, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to ask you to go into all the programs. What would you say is like, what would you say would be like the crowning achievement of the foundation, you know, looking back once it's all quote unquote said and done?
Finding 1 million Barack Obamas and 1 million Michelle Obamas and connecting them together in the largest network of global change makers that the planet has ever seen. That is the North Star. That is the promise of, Manny, if I were to describe the central promise of Barack Obama, in his farewell address in early 2017, he closed by saying, as President of the United States, I'm asking you to believe not in my ability to bring about change, but in yours. Don't wait for the politician. Don't wait for the president. Don't wait for the mayor, for the governor, for the CEO or whatever. You have all of the power within you and potential. You lead. And his campaign in 2008 was because of thousands and tens of thousands of mostly young people basically taking ownership over an election against all odds, right? And so when he was leaving the White House, and this was October of 2016, when he called me in to the Oval and he laid out this vision of what he wanted to build, and this vision of there are these leaders, civic leaders throughout the planet, you are one of them, who are doing amazing work in their communities, but they are isolated, they are not connected. In many ways, on a daily basis, they are reinventing the wheel. And imagine what change could look like and what the potential could be for this country and the world if this universe of people were connected to each other. And so that's the North Star.
And how are you doing?
We are 3 years in, and what we have learned so far, I think, is that the central idea is right. We now have programming in Africa. We have programming in the Asia Pacific region. We have programming in the United States. We are beginning to deploy online programming. And one example, for our top civic leadership program, the Obama Fellows, these are for people who are running organizations. They are civic leaders. We selected 20 of them. We received 23,000 applications.
That is not, I don't know how you choose 20 people out of 23,000. That's crazy.
Which in the President Obama's response was, when we said, Mr. President, good news, bad news. The good news is we have 23,000 applications. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's the bad news too. And then he said, okay, what are we going to do to engage the 22,980 we didn't select, because they have a role to play also in restitching our civic fabric.
Yeah.
And so our challenge now as an organization over the next 5, 10, 15 years, even as we fine tune the programming, is to say to those other 22,980, here is how you can be part of this network and engage in your community. And so that's the programming. You mentioned, Manny, the museum.
Yes.
Here is what we're not.
Sorry.
The Obama presidential.
Damn.
What's that?
It's not a museum. Right.
So there is a museum within it, but the presidential center, here's one way to think about it. If every September, the world's elected leaders descend on New York for the UN General Assembly to talk about the world's problem, where is the place on the planet where the world's civic and citizen leaders descend to talk about how to make the world better? That's what we're building on the south side of Chicago. It is 2 miles from their home where they lived when he was elected president, very close to where Michelle grew up. And so it becomes the central hub around which all of this civic leadership and citizen engagement emanates from. And so everything goes back to that North Star. Whether it's the museum, whether it's the programming in person or online, because one of the things that this moment is showing us, to use your word about this moment, leadership has never been more important. And and active citizenship. In Manning, when I say use the word citizen, and I want everybody to anchor on this, um, citizenship too often gets defined as simply my right to this and my right to that,
Mm,
or I have to vote, or I have to serve on a jury, or I have to pay taxes.
right.
That's the bare minimum. Citizenship has a broader sense of what is my obligation, what are my responsibilities. It's this notion of mutual reciprocity
Mm,
and the stake that, so when I shelter in place, yes, I am giving up a little bit of my right, but I am doing it in service of the fact that I am an interdependent member of a community. I am a citizen with an obligation that extends beyond my body or the walls of my home, right? That's whether you want to call it patriotism or whatever thing you want to describe it is, right? That's a different view. In some way, it's I believe the essence of what being a civic leader means, right? Is that notion of compassion and what I owe you, with the understanding that when I fall, and I will, that you and my neighbors and my fellow citizens will be there to also um, lift me up. So that's at the core of what we do and who we are.
I felt like I just got the spirit in me, you know. I felt it through my little porthole, my little screen here. I had the David spirit. Um, uh, David, can I ask you for 10 more minutes of your time? I know we said we'd end
Of course,
thank you.
happy to do it.
For the folks who are tuned in, I want to give you the opportunity to ask your questions of David. So if you have a question, you can type it in now. Um, just quick follow up on that. Do you think the little moment we just had, do you feel like we may have an opportunity with everything that's going on right now to create more active citizens because we are being asked to be of service and to take action for our fellow person?
I do, but I'm also not Pollyannish about it. Right?
Right.
There's um, it's beautiful to see at 8 o'clock at night in different communities,
Yeah.
people applauding the
Yes.
caregivers.
Yeah.
It is it, but what is our responsibility? And there was an article about this yesterday. Doctors and nurses and caregivers who are making decisions on a daily basis
Yeah.
about the allocation of resources and what that does to them as people. Who cares for the caregiver?
Right.
And the reason I raise that is that that is then the test of one of the tests of how we come out of this. Once we're able to venture out,
Right.
what residue remains? And the final thing I'll say on this is, if we simply view our actions through the president has asked us to do something, the governor has asked us to do something, or the mayor has decreed or whatever,
Yeah.
that is a missed opportunity. This isn't just top down, you must do X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a different spirit about that understanding of interdependence in a way that in some ways has been missing, but this moment, I think, creates an opening for that, hopefully.
Well, and I know that it must ring true to you, particularly because of your origin story with your involvement in politics. You know, I read about the unfortunate accident that happened to your mother in the silver factory,
Mm.
and how you got into law because of the need to defend workers like your mother. And now we are seeing in a kind of a great way, so many people waking up and asking, how are we protecting our workers? And also, what does our unemployment look like? And what about, paid leave? And what about, all these things to protect the people, our workforce? And it is an opportunity. And so I bet it's hitting you in particular right now.
is. It is hitting me, and the paradox of I am in my home, I am
Right.
healthy, my
Right.
family is healthy, but half a mile from my home here, where I'm talking to you from on the south side of Chicago, you've got predominantly African American communities,
Yep.
and two-thirds of them two-thirds of the deaths in Chicago are African Americans, even though it's a third of the population. And so it's exposing what folks in this community and others have known very long, but now, okay, what do we do about it?
Mm-hmm. Right.
What do all of us do about it?
Right.
So that's another test.
So before we get to audience questions, which we will do right after this question, I want to just kind of, I want to ask you I want you to be President Obama for a second, okay? So less hair.
Okay.
And what I would say to you is a lot of people my age, at least, or in my generation, grew up uplifted by your message of hope and inspiration, and you gave us faith in politics and in government. And that vision, that dream was in many ways crushed by the election of 2016. And I know, President Obama, that you said, that it doesn't erase all the work that you've done, and we'll get back to it. We all have to fight. I was on the conference call that you did. I know, I heard you, but it still really hurt. And a lot, it has been a really, really dark 4 years. I mean, it's been 3.5 years, whatever, how long it's been a nightmare, President. And now we have another election, and I watched your video endorsing Joe Biden, and I want to believe that we can get back to that place. But right now we're in a pandemic. I'm not allowed to leave my home. I can't knock on doors. It's been 3.5 years since you were president, and it's tough right now. What advice would you give me to inspire me to know that we can get back to that place where we were on the right track again?
I think what he would say, understanding that I am retired, Manny, from my old job of electoral politics. That's David talking.
Okay.
I think what he would say is, there has always been a one step forward, two steps back, two steps forward, one step back. That has been the consistent story, not just of American history and politics, but throughout the world. Whenever there has been a moment of progress, a progressive moment, it has always been the case that especially young people took what had been achieved in the past and moved it one step forward. That if you essentially take the darkness that many people are feeling and become cynical rather than hopeful, cynicism is easy. It's a default. It's cheap. What progress is ever made that's animated by that sense of cynicism? None. In fact, it creates the opportunity, because as people withdraw, someone is going to fill that. When you don't vote, you're creating the space for the others who are voting.
Yeah.
Right? On the flip side, hope isn't naive. Hope isn't closing your eyes and wishing that something is going to be better. Right?
Yeah.
Hope is, which for me is one of the distinctions between organizing and activism. Activism is necessary. It is the energy. It is the lifeblood. It is the protest. It is the march. It's the standing up and saying, this is wrong, or this is right. Organizing, then, is essentially breaking down the component parts, understanding power, understanding the different strategies and the creation of coalitions with people that you may disagree with on a whole bunch of other things, but all of a sudden you have an opportunity to move it forward. And so, you know, I think that that's the way he would begin to respond. And think about this. 20 plus million people were able to, because of the Affordable Care Act, get health insurance. And even as there have been efforts to chip away and to gut it and to undermine it, today in San Francisco and other places throughout the country, right? Now there's something to build on with the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Right. One of the happiest days of my life was on the day that the Supreme Court ruled on the marriage equality case. That night I drove home to get my wife and daughters because we knew that what was going to happen in the White House was going to be lit in rainbow. And I wanted my two girls to be outside the gates of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and take a look at their building at the White House. And in many, when all of a sudden you've got thousands of people there looking at that building, and the man to my right in tears saying, I never thought that I would see the day that this happened, right? Not only is that a step forward, but now it creates norms, it changes culture, it serves as the foundation for the next breakthrough, right? And so it's important for all of us, no matter what our political perspective or our view of civic engagement or citizenship, ever to view an issue as being either resolved or unresolved. This is a participatory, step-by-step march for all of us, and there's so much more that. But those are two things that just come to mind.
Well, I'm looking forward to continuing to march with you together, arm in arm. Let's get to some questions, shall we? The first is from William Reinhardt. He says, hi, David. My question is, what role will the Obama Foundation play in the 2020 election? Will there be a voter registration or a digital component? Oh, this is Billy Reinhardt. He's an OFA alum, and he also has time to note that I look awesome, even though I'm in the midst of a pandemic. Thanks, Billy. Appreciate it.
Billy, thank you for your question. The Obama Foundation itself will not play a role. We are organized as a 501c3 nonpartisan, non-electoral organization. Our work is around building leader capacity, how those leaders express their leadership is very, very individualized. The president, Mrs. Obama,
yes,
and other facets of their work, including the work that they've been doing around redistricting, they will engage in the election, but the Obama Foundation will not.
So Mrs. Obama, that's the future vice president, right?
No.
Vice President Obama? I'm ready for it. I am 100% here for Vice President Michelle Obama, but after listening to her narrate becoming, I know that that's definitely not going to happen. Okay, Maddie Shirer, or that she didn't seem to would want it, but that's another conversation. Maddie Shirer asks, hey David, what do you internally say to yourself when you wake up each morning? How do you set your lens? Great question.
When I get up every morning, the first thing I do right after I get my cup of coffee is to sit on the cushion and to meditate for a good 20 minutes to 30 minutes before the day begins. And it really depends on whatever storm I am facing, if I am, or whatever issue I'm grappling with, or sometimes just dropping in moments where I know that I'm going to have a difficult day. It is one type of meditation practice around compassion and around dealing with biases that I have, perceptions that I have, different ways of viewing the world that will not be helpful, especially when I'm feeling stress. If there's been a specific thing that I'm really grappling with that's personal in nature, and then you just, for me, I try to create this moment of clarity where, for my practice, it will just begin with mindfulness. But then really focus on whatever insight that I can bring to the different challenge. And so anchoring my day around this moment of mind first, then transitions into a journaling exercise for, depending on the day and whether I have time, to then work out more of a stream of consciousness rather than here are the 3 or 4 things that I need to wrestle with the day. And so the way, for me, one ties into the other, is that if I can spend the first 20 to 30 minutes of my day trying to get a better understanding of my mind and what I'm confronting, the journaling exercise then almost becomes this conduit to express it, or to take one sliver of it and to work with it and play with it. And so I've been doing a form of that for the better part of the past 10, 11 years. And that for me is, it really sets the tone. Not in a perfect way, because notwithstanding, and we all face this, notwithstanding the internal work that you engage in to understand your, oh, I always react poorly to this, and I know I'm going to react poorly to this, and this time it's going to be different. And then you're in the middle of it and you screwed up again. So that's.
And then after that, you eat exactly 8 almonds, correct?
7.
7 almonds. All right, let's close with Michaela's question. I think it's an appropriate question to close on. Michaela Perez asks, do you have any advice for young people interested in running for office?
Yes. Let me borrow the advice that President Obama gave.
Probably not a bad source.
Which was, focus less on what you want to do and more on why you want to do it. If I care deeply about education and education equity and education policy, and that is my North Star, and it's something that I've thought through and I'm passionate about, and then if I express it through politics or through running for office, I'm now, I know my why. I know why I began to do the work to begin with. It can be a broader sense of I want to do as much good for as many people as possible. But having that deep understanding of why you actually want to run for office and what good you want to do is foundational, because you may find that you could be more effective, or you may be more effective as an organizer or in social entrepreneurship or in another way that is more suited to who you are. And so that's the first piece. The second piece about politics, and as someone who ran for office at 23 served on my local school board, ran for city council at 27 and served on my local city council, ran for county office in my 30s and did that. There is nothing more humbling. There is nothing more, nothing brings you, at least my experience was, a better sense of humility than knowing that when someone goes and votes for you, when someone puts their faith and trust in you to make decisions for them about things that are consequential, that is a deep and solemn and important responsibility that keeps you very, very rooted. And the second that you lose that why, the second that all of a sudden it isn't about the service, but it becomes about the power. The second that it's no longer about my responsibility to my community, but it becomes in some ways an ego play, is the moment when it's time to do something different.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm so glad that she asked that question, because I believe that everyone at some point in their life should engage in a public way civically, because of that sense of responsibility, and it brings you closer to that truth that I believe about mutual reciprocity and about the fact that we're all in this together. And I'm not a Democrat, and I'm not a Republican, and I'm not a Portuguese American, and I'm not this. I am a member of a community. And I'm lucky to be a member of a community. And so how do I make my community a little bit better with the short amount of time that I have on this rock? So thank you.
Well, I, for one, feel honored to be on this rock at the same time as the likes of David Simas, to be honest. And I'm very thankful for you for giving us some of your time and your inspiration and your heart, big and bold and golden that it is. And I just want to say thanks. Thanks for all the work that you're doing running the Obama Foundation. It's been 3 years. I'm really excited for what the 30 years looks like and the legacy of it. And I want to be there at the opening day in the center. And I don't know what I want to do. I want to do something. I'm really excited to be there and to see it and to see it come alive. And I know it'll be beautiful. Real quick, for those who've tuned in, thank you. I would highly suggest signing up for the Obama Foundation's updates. The operator, if you don't mind putting the Obama Foundation website in the chat box for people to click on. Also, if you are able financially, I would love to ask you to become a sponsor of Manny's. It's $36 a month, and it is how we are planning on making it through this difficult time. We are a community-funded physical space, believe it or not. We're funded by a community of individuals and would love for you to join that community. And I thank you in advance for doing that. So become a sponsor of Manny's if you're not already. Susan, I know you are, and thank you very much, Susan Pfeiffer, for being a sponsor. And sign up for the Obama Foundation listserv and donate to the Obama Foundation as well to help continue President Obama's legacy. David, I'm going to give you the last word. How would you like to close us out?
I want to remind everybody about one of the passages that President Obama gave in speeches in 2008 and 2007, where he would look out mostly at young people, and he would remind them that change doesn't happen if we wait for one person or one time. We are the ones waiting for. We are the change that we seek. And in moments like this, with so much at stake, in moments that are so surreal, that reminder that we are the ones that we've been waiting for is something that should give us all hope, as we go forward. So Manny, thank you so much for what you do and for creating this space in this community. I hope to continue this conversation at some point in the future. Thank you.
I hope so as well. Thank you so much, David, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a good evening. Thanks, David.